Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. All praises, all praises, all praises to the heavenly, holy, almighty creator of infinity, eternity, the universe, and all there is. Hello, family. This is Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. Back together again with you to share and to review. We are here together in our wonderful zone of safety, comfort, warmth, and love. And today we will be going over the coronavirus, COVID-19, some information on updates, some information in regards to some movements in employers as it pertains to getting the shot. And then to top it off, family, the coup de grace, the cherry on top, we're going to look at an interview with a CDC analyst doctor who is going to shed a little bit of light on the purpose, the intent of vaccinations in the overall umbrella of COVID-19. So this information share is for those who are concerned about COVID-19, those who regard COVID-19 as a conspiracy, those who call it corona and all these various bywords and designations, those who are questionable about the virus, the vaccination, and the overall air of propaganda surrounding this containment or incarceration that we are in. And we see a lot of resistance. We see a lot of compliance. We see hesitancy. We see fear. We see those who have the spiritual eye and ear of discernment, a lot of activity that is partitioning or separating the sheep from the goats, the tare from the wheat, those of faith, those of no faith, the believers, and those who sit on the fence. So we will be sharing 3 videos. The first video is going to be an update by the American Medical Association. Then we will be sharing a video about some employer incentives for vaccinations. And last but not least, the boom for the bomb. So family, sit back, review the banners in the below. We are going to have a wonderful time where we can deliberate and elaborate in the context of critical thinking for our overall expansion of understanding. So we will now get some updates from some doctors as it pertains to the conditions of COVID, the status of America. So sit back, family. Let's put on our attention caps. Let's clue in. This first video is in excess of a little less than 14 minutes. So we are ready, and let's get our screens and everything all squared away for you. And here we go.
Hello, this is the American Medical Association's COVID-19 update. Today we have our weekly look at the numbers, trends, and latest news about COVID-19 with AMA's Chief Health and Science Officer, Dr. Mira Irons in Chicago. I'm Todd Unger, AMA's Chief Experience Officer in Chicago. Dr. Irons, big news this week from AstraZeneca, a potential fourth vaccine option, and also some confusion about the data it released. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, absolutely. It's been a little bit of up and down with this information. So AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine was found to be 79% effective against symptomatic COVID-19 and 100% effective against severe disease in a long-awaited U.S. study, according to the results announced by Monday by AstraZeneca. However, and the plan then was that they were going to complete the paperwork for an application for an emergency use authorization for the FDA. However, on the heels of that announcement came a highly unusual statement released after midnight from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases that said it was concerned AstraZeneca used outdated information from the large-scale trial when it reported the results on Monday. And this is a quote, which may have provided an incomplete view of the efficacy data.
What does that, can I just ask you, what does that mean, outdated information? Do you have any insight into?
No,
that?
I'm sorry, I really don't. And, this is really the role of the U.S. Data Safety and Monitoring Board to work with the company at this point to review the data and release the updated information as quickly as possible. As of Monday, as I said, the company was preparing to apply for an emergency authorization from the FDA, but the shot may not actually be needed in the U.S. as it will likely not become available before May. And now this new concern about the data could add to that timeline.
And this is on, on top of, a rocky last week with concerns about safety in Europe. Can you talk a little bit more about how that situation is resolved?
Yes. So, in Europe, what we heard was that European regulators, after some safety concerns about the increased incidence of thromboembolic phenomenon, eventually cleared the vaccine, although some countries are using it and others are still paused, I believe. And with regards to the U.S. trial, although no clinical trial is large enough to rule out extremely rare side effects, AstraZeneca reported that its study turned up no serious safety issues. Government officials and public health experts expressed hope that the results would improve global confidence in this vaccine. And, even if the vaccine is not used in the United States, because we have enough supply of the other vaccines, receiving emergency authorization from the FDA, whose rigorous review process is considered the global gold standard, would be an important milestone for AstraZeneca. The trial itself had more than 32,000 participants. It was the largest test of its kind for the shot. And another unique aspect of the trial is it showed that the vaccine offered strong protection for older people who had not been as well represented in earlier studies. Now, again, this is all qualified because of the current concerns. However, I have to say that the FDA and especially the External Advisory Committee, the VRBAC, look at all of the data very closely. It will once they convene the VRBAC, be a public meeting. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and a close look at the data. The one thing I do feel confident is that the rigorous process that has occurred with the prior vaccines will occur with this one also once that application is submitted.
Well, it does seem like states are accelerating, their.
So, family, we're going over information regarding these vaccination trials or these vaccination. Okay, so we have 4 companies producing vaccinations. The question has always been, how long does it take to produce a vaccination? How long does it take to test? How long does it take to determine side effects, the spectrum of effects that a person could experience? What is the status of America as it pertains to these vaccines, the trial clinics and studies? Let's get some more detail.
Vaccines, expanding eligibility to try to increase the pace of vaccinations. Are we seeing this in the numbers, and are we on track to meet that goal that President Biden suggested for May?
Yeah, I think we are. We do continue to stay on track. Nationally, about 25% of the US population has received at least one shot. The CDC on Monday said about 82.8 million people have received at least one dose, and about 44.9 million have been fully vaccinated. The other thing that's important to note is that the Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccine is now integrated into the distribution systems, and those are single-dose vaccines. So, once people are vaccinated with that one, they immediately go into that fully vaccinated side of the ledger. So I think those numbers are going to start coming up. Providers are administering about 2.49 million doses per day on average as of Sunday, but I'm sure you've heard the media reports. There have been some 3 million dose days. So if the country maintains its current pace of vaccinating people, about half of the total population would at least partially be vaccinated around mid-May, and hopefully nearly all around late July, assuming the supply pledges are met and vaccines are eventually available to children.
That's excellent news. And we are seeing states continue to increase eligibility. What are the trends that you're seeing there?
So, West Virginia joined Alaska and Mississippi on Monday in making everyone older than 16 eligible. New York said residents older than 50 could sign up for a shot starting this week, and Tennessee announced all adults will be eligible starting April 5th. The White House also announced on Monday another federally run vaccination site, which will open in Washington State and be able to administer up to 1,200 shots per day. The issue now is that we have to make sure that sites are available in places where everyone can go and get their vaccines, so that access is available for everyone.
And it does appear that we're in a race against time, because we're reading reports from the CDC about concerns about a quote preventable surge. What are you seeing right now in terms of the trends of cases and deaths?
So the current the numbers today are that 29,870,135 people have been diagnosed with a COVID infection, and 542,993 people have died of COVID. On Sunday, at least 444 new COVID deaths and 34,236 new cases reported. We do know that reporting is usually down on weekends, so that if you look at the 7-day average over the past week, that has continued to kind of stick at that 54,407 cases per day. It's a decrease of about 7% from the average 2 weeks earlier, but it's that number has basically been flat for 2 weeks, and that number is too high, because that means that there's still active disease in the community. Persistent outbreaks in the Northeast and Michigan have offset progress in other parts of the country. Michigan especially is adding about twice as many cases a day as it was 2 weeks ago. New Jersey leads the country.
All right, so I interject in here, family, of course, because this is Revelations.Unveiled Detroit. Now, one thing about these COVID rates and statistics, I always interject. They leave out an important number. So we always get the base number of cases. We get a new number of those recently infected, and we get the number of those who died. But they rarely consistently keep in the number of those who have recovered and are healthy, well, are coming back to their former selves. If 24 million people have experienced this infection and 500,000 people have passed, that means 23,500,000 people have survived or made it through this pandemic, pestilence, infection, or whatever designation is put upon it. 90+% survival rate after infection. Keep that in mind, family, and we continue.
country by a large margin. Daily death reports, which have stayed stubbornly high long after the post-holiday surge, have finally started to come down sharply. The country's averaging about 1,000 newly reported deaths a day, the fewest since November. And in the last 7 days, in the last week, the 7-day average has dropped 30%. So we're hopeful, that things are continuing to go in the right direction, although the numbers are still high enough so they can move.
There's concern, obviously, about the kind of loosening of restrictions is kind of contributing to this flattening out, and even in some places like Michigan, you say, leading to an increase. What other kind of key trends are you noting? Why don't we start first with, a lot of action down in the state of Florida?
Oh, absolutely. The spring break is a big driver of concern. We've all seen the pictures where we all know this story well enough to know that, we should be worried. In South Beach, police struggled to control overwhelming crowds over the weekend. Officials in Miami Beach decided on Sunday to extend an emergency curfew for up to 3 weeks. Miami-Dade County, which includes Miami Beach, has recently endured one of the nation's worst outbreaks. And the state is thought to have the highest concentration of the B.1.1.7 variant, which is the more contagious and possibly more lethal variant first identified in Britain. The concern is obviously what happens when all these spring breakers return home, and whether that could fuel another surge.
Yes, on top of the trends that we're seeing in travel, I'm just reading that we're, over the weekend seeing actually a peak since last March. So a lot of risk there. I can see with people traveling and congregating and breaking the rules. So we'll keep our eye close on that data. Any more news about the variants? You mentioned some of them becoming predominant and more contagious and potentially more lethal. What are we seeing there?
Dr. Walensky, the head of the CDC, addressed this at the same White House briefing on Monday. She did say that the virus variants are making up a bigger share of cases, and the CDC is scaling up its efforts substantially to track down the variants, and that will continue to grow, in large part due to the $1.75 billion in funds for genomic sequencing in the American Rescue Plan. On the CDC site today, the UK variant, the B.1.1.7 variant, is in 51 jurisdictions in the United States, so it's pretty much saturated. It's in the United, and across the United States. The South African variant's in 26, and the Brazilian variant is in 15 jurisdictions. So the variants are in our communities. Dr. Walensky told lawmakers last week that between 10 and 14,000 test samples were being sequenced each week to locate variants, and that they're aiming for about 25,000. But I'd like to quote something that she said, which I think really just is an important message. We are at a critical point in this pandemic. We must act now. I'm worried that if we don't take the right actions now, we will have another avoidable surge, just as we're seeing in Europe right now, and just as we are so aggressively scaling up vaccination. Europe tends to be about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of us. And, if history repeats itself, several countries in Europe are on lockdowns currently. So we're just hoping that people hang in there.
Absolutely. I don't want to see a repeat of that. Last question, any big news or statements from the AMA that we want folks to be aware of?
I have 2 of note. So on March 16th, the AMA applauded the Biden administration in acting promptly to update Medicare payment rates for COVID-19 vaccine administration. And on March 17th, the AMA urged Congress to support legislation that would prevent arbitrary across-the-board Medicare cuts that threaten the viability of physician practices during the pandemic. The letter to Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader McCarthy points out that physician practices still face overwhelming financial challenges and pressures associated with higher overhead costs, like the cost of personal protective equipment, and lost revenue due to fewer patient visits and delayed elective procedures during the pandemic. Injecting additional uncertainty into the healthcare system is an unnecessary distraction during a time when physicians and others are focused on fighting the pandemic, the letter said.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Irons, and sharing your perspectives. We'll have you back next week for another look at the trends and data. Thanks for joining us today. Please take care. For more information on COVID-19, visit ama-assn.org/COVID-19.
All right, family. So that was us getting some current COVID information from the American Medical Association. So the videos and the links will be in the description box when this is all said and done. And so now we have information about COVID rates, COVID statuses, the states of impact, pending legislation regarding medical recipients of care and service for COVID, various surges, new vaccine expansion of products, the Johnson shot that is only one treatment instead of multiple treatment. So there we can say we have a semi or a base objective view of the recent COVID updates. So we will keep our eyes and ears open. We will maintain and substantiate our personal health as we continue on our daily journeys. And so now this next video, family, is for the people who are working from home, those who are affected at the corporate office and were in a status of wondering, are we going back to work? Is there going to be a job left? How is it going to impact me? And specifically, this is a video on how employers are incentivizing workers to return back to work and get what we call the jab. So family, we're getting this video all squared up for you now. Want to make sure we are ready. So let's take a look. And the name of this is COVID-19 vaccine. Can your employer make you take the shot? Let's have a look. Soon as we get
On March 13th, 2020, millions of workers throughout the country logged off their computers, packed up their desks, and never came back. For months, many of America's offices have sat empty, conference rooms idle, monitors dark, coffee mugs dusty. But as vaccines start to roll out, employers are making plans to fill those offices back up. How quickly they succeed could depend on how many of their employees are vaccinated, which begs the question, can your boss make you take the vaccine? And if so, will they?
I think so.
This is Robert Ayafola. He covers labor and employment law for Bloomberg Law. We brought him into an empty office to ask him the question on every worker's mind. Can your employer legally require you to get a COVID-19 vaccine? Turns out the answer is yes, but
Every state in the country, except for Montana, has this legal regime which employment relationships are considered to be at will, which means if you're an employer in the private sector and your workforce isn't unionized, under the at-will employment doctrine, an employer can fire a worker for any legal reason. So generally speaking, that gives them the authority to require their workers to take a vaccine. But there are exceptions to that.
before we get to those exceptions, let's pause here for a minute to say something about the vaccines currently available. In normal times, a vaccine follows a strict approval process, from non-clinical testing to clinical trials to FDA approval and manufacturing. This process can take years. But these, of course, are not normal times. All COVID vaccines have been approved under what's called an emergency use authorization. This is an expedited process that the FDA can use during public health emergencies. Employment lawyers are split over whether that's an obstacle for businesses that want to require their employees get vaccinated before a vaccine gets full FDA approval.
So I've spoken to some employment lawyers who have told me that whether it comes from the emergency use authorization or whether it comes from the full approval process, it's the same thing. So employers are relatively clear to impose mandates. But I've also heard from a few lawyers that say it's more complicated than that. The law here is very unclear. So I do think that this is something that will eventually get tested in court.
The bottom line is that depending on the state, a worker who's fired for not getting vaccinated may be able to challenge the termination if the vaccine became available through the emergency use authorization. Regardless, there are always exceptions to employer vaccine mandates. Now, where were we on those?
So there's several clear and established exceptions to an employer's authority to impose something like vaccine mandate. One of those are for health-related reasons. So under the Americans with Disabilities Act, an employer is required to provide reasonable accommodation for a disability.
So health is one. Exception number two, religion.
The way the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission defines religion, it's not just faith in a God or membership in an established church. It's a sincerely held moral or ethical belief. So that sort of person would have an opportunity to ask for religious accommodation.
Finally, the presence of a union can also add a layer of complication.
One issue may be that they would have to negotiate with the union before imposing a mandate.
So we know that, with a few exceptions, employers generally can require their workers get vaccinated. But should they?
What I've heard from lawyers is, generally speaking, there's complications to imposing the use of the vaccine that could be more trouble than it's worth. That could include being forced to fire talented, hard to replace workers. There are legal gray areas that need to be taken into consideration.
With polling showing some Americans resistant to taking the vaccine, employers are going to have to decide how heavy-handed they want to be. Do they risk losing a portion of their workforce, or at least damaging morale? Vaccine mandates have been used in the past in hospitals and other healthcare settings. With the pandemic raging, will companies in other industries try requiring COVID-19 vaccinations?
There are some industries where workers have close contact with each other, a manufacturing line, a meatpacking line, things like this. There's also jobs where workers have close contact with the general public. Retail is an example of this. But ultimately, it'll probably come down to a case-by-case basis. Employers will have to make a decision what works best for their individual workplace.
Adding another wrinkle, legislators in a handful of states have proposed laws that would ban vaccine mandates. While many are unlikely to pass, the efforts underscore the legal tightrope businesses are going to have to walk as the vaccines become more widely available.
So over the next few months, we're going to see how some of these theoretical issues play out in real life. We'll see what companies end up imposing vaccine mandates. We'll see what industries those mandates come in. And we'll see how courts treat arguments against these mandates.
All right, family. So now we see the question of employer operation. What are the employers going to do? Now, I've had family members who have gotten the jab, vaccination shot, however you characterize it. My personal decision is to not get it. I am of good health, of sound practice, the social distancing. When I go out, I'll take a mask, but my practice is not the general wearing of the mask. I'm one of the people who work from home. I particularly like it in this industry, which fits me. So I don't believe an employer should force a worker to take a vaccination in regards to any realm, mandated by government, etc. It should always be a personal option for the medical health, safety, spiritual, and conscious decision for that individual. No penalties imposed. You either have it, get it, or you don't. And we leave it simply as that. And so, all right, family, this last video is an interview on CNN with a doctor from the CDC. And here we're going to hear how this vaccination program or system aligns with some of what people regard as a conspiracy. It aligns to give evidence. Hey, this situation could be created, and these elements that are being imposed upon us are part of a greater agenda. So listening to this doctor, it adds fuel to those who believe there is an agenda. Very questionable statements, and it aligns with a presidential petition of action. So family, let us listen carefully, and we'll, do a couple of laps with it. And I got this link from another YouTuber that I'm subscribed to at the ABL channel. The link will be in the description as well. But let us take a listen at the chicanery, the malevolent mechanisms by which these people are operating, are creating a fear, are enriching these pharmaceutical industries, imposing questionable.
Today's video is brought to you by ablmerch.com.
All right, let us, you jumped in there too quick on me. Make sure you get everything queued up right. But these machinations that they're using and causing fear in people to get these jabs, injections, quote unquote. So as everybody's
who desperately want the vaccine right now.
Everyone's choice is going to be their choice. It should not be a mandate. So let me get us all together here, family, so we can have a clear understanding of what she's saying, what it actually means for and to us, and then we'll go from there. So let's see what we have. Got to cue these spots up just right for you, family. And also, we will be doing some additional programming. Please go to the channel. There's over 300 video submissions of history, commentary, current events. Please come to the channel and subscribe. So we are already here. Let's get the screen together. And here we go. A Chinese doctor let the cat out of the vaccine bag. That's the name of this video. And let me do my quick commercial, family, because always I want to be of respect to all parties, the brothers on YouTube, the news agencies, and all other services. So this is fair use for entertainment, review, educational, and edification purposes. And here we go.
Go ahead and roll it. Do you believe that races, the variables are, and what the messaging should be?
My main concern is that we're not going to reach herd immunity because of vaccine hesitancy. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe who desperately want the vaccine right now. And they're thinking, oh, well, it's just a small percentage of people who are actually anti-vaxxers. And that's true. There is the anti-science, anti-vaxxer contingent. But I think that there are many more people, millions of people who, for whatever reason, have concerns about the vaccine, who just don't know what's in it for them. And we need to make it clear to them that the vaccine is the ticket back to pre-pandemic life. And the window to do that is really narrowing. I mean, you were mentioning, Chris, about how all these states are reopening. They're reopening at 100%. And we have a very narrow window to tie reopening policy to vaccination status. Because otherwise, if everything is reopened, then what's the carrot going to be? How are we going to incentivize people to actually get the vaccine? So that's why I think the CDC and the Biden administration.
Did she say, what is the carrot going to be to incentivize people to get this virus? Let me go back, family. I got to hear that again. Let's get it right. Let's listen.
Vaccination status, because otherwise, if everything is reopened, then what's the carrot going to be? How are we going to incentivize people to actually get the vaccine? So that's why I think the CDC and the Biden administration needs to come out a lot bolder and say, if you're vaccinated, you can do all these things. Here are all these freedoms that you have, because otherwise, people are going to go out and enjoy these freedoms anyway. And I fear a situation of coming into the fall where we never reach herd immunity, and then we get hit by the next surge of COVID-19 in the fall, something that we could have prevented if we just got people vaccinated now.
Thank you, Dr. Alina Nguyen. Appreciate it.
All right. All right, family. We heard that. So her goal is to get herd immunity to before the fall. And the incentive to get people vaccinated is to dangle the carrot of returning back to pre-COVID society. So let us go back and let us make sure we hear and understand. So some would say there's a tone of concern. Some would say, I'm not sure about that. So let us try it again.
Let's go ahead and roll it. Do you believe that races, the variables are, and what the messaging should be?
My main concern is that we're not going to reach herd immunity because of vaccine hesitancy. And I know that's hard for a lot of people to believe who desperately want the vaccine right now. And they're thinking, oh, well, it's just a small percentage of people who are actually anti-vaxxers. And that's true. There is the anti-science, anti-vaxxer contingent. But I think that there are many more people, millions of people who, for whatever reason, have concerns about the vaccine, who just don't know what's in it for them. And we need to make it clear to them that the vaccine is the ticket back to pre-pandemic life. And the window to do that is really narrowing. I mean, you were mentioning, Chris, about how all these states are reopening. They're reopening at 100%. And we have a very narrow window to tie reopening policy to vaccination status. Because otherwise, if everything is reopened, then what's the carrot going to be? How are we going to incentivize people to actually get the vaccine? So that's why I think the CDC and the Biden administration needs to come out a lot bolder and say, if you're vaccinated, you can do all these things. Here are all these freedoms that you have. Because otherwise, people are going to go out and enjoy these freedoms anyway. And I fear a situation of coming into the fall where we never reach herd immunity. And then we get hit by the next surge of COVID-19 in the fall, something that we could have prevented if we just got people vaccinated now.
Thank you, Dr. Alina Nguyen. Appreciate it.
All right, family. All right, family. That was Dr. Alina Nguyen of the CDC. So again, all these links will be included in the description. Please follow the banner below for any love, offerings, gifts, support, alms, for any material if you were enlightened, educated, or entertained. Family, I'm not getting a shot. The CDC has an agenda of giving out these COVID vaccines that's tied into the pharmaceutical industry. They are making hand over fist, be it out of necessity, be it out of concern, out of fear, but with a 90+% recovery rate and people going out to enjoy the expanses of spring and summer, we see that these agencies and these other mechanisms are trying to enact or induce policies to get as many people vaccinated as possible. So, is the vaccine safe? As in the previous video, they gave us a timeline of the usual steps of testing a vaccine for efficacy and safety. This is not these vaccines under this COVID situation. They are using a emergency act to get people or to have these states closed or get these injections, quote unquote, legalized for use. We don't know what these things are. We are, or those who receive the jab, you are the test animal. You are the monkey. You are the lab rat. You are year one of an experimental piece of chemical being injected into your bodies. What will occur at year 2? What are the results at year 5? What are the results at year 10? So this tempest and this fury of fear has been imposed on society, and those of us with clarity, we resist, whether openly or passively. So, as always, it is a person's choice to receive, not receive, get, not get. There should be no mandate for a vaccine. You practice the regular guidelines of hygiene and distancing socially, which is basic common sense in operating in society. So, family, review the information. Let us deliberate. Let us be objective and critical in our movements for our own personal safety. Everyone has been affected by so-called COVID, from loved ones passing to job status and security being compromised, to the realigning of society. We are all impacted. We are all together. But one thing for sure, let us maintain, let us endure, let us persevere, let us continue to grow, and let us continue to love. So we will keep up on the status of this COVID containment and incarceration, these vaccine vexations, these jab jungle expeditions. And so we cast no aspersions, we make no recommendations, but we be critical in reviewing with our spiritual eye and absorbing critically with our spiritual ear for the benefit, maintenance, and safety of the family. So, family, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. Please review the banners. Please come back upon the next review of information. This is Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit. And as you know, I love you. I love you. I love you. So we're going to take it on home with our music of therapy so we can get ready for the rest of our journey. All praises. Revelations.Unveiled.Detroit.